In the early 80s, a new generation of machines suddenly flooded the market, and a revolution was thus brought into being. The Sinclair ZX80, the first reasonably priced home computer, was highly influential and spawned a host of similar devices which strived to improve on its technological wizardry. Although most commercial software for these computers was probably written in machine code, the set of instructions were understood by the central processing unit. They could also be programmed by novices who were learning to use a much simpler mode of communication, the dialect of BASIC stored within the ROM, or read-only memory, of their device. For those of you curious about ROMs, Google it. Programs written in BASIC took slightly longer to execute than those in machine code, hence the latter language being favoured by professional writers of software. BASIC stood for Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. The original version of it was created by John G. Kemeny and Thomas E. Kurse at Dartmouth College in 1963, out of a desire for students in non-scientific fields to gain experience in computer use. However, the capacity to be programmed in BASIC was not universal within the world of early home computers. In 1982, a small computer similar in appearance to the earlier Sinclair ZX80 was launched onto the market for $85.95, which is the equivalent of the price of a quite expensive laptop today. It was known as the Jupiter Ace, named after an early British computer called the Pilot Ace, and the language that formed its set of instructions was known as Forth. Unlike Fortran, COBOL mentioned in Part 1, and the aforementioned BASIC, this name was not an acronym, although during its early years it was often spelled in all capital letters. It is a stack-oriented programming language and interactive integrated development environment designed by Charles H. Chuck Moore, a US computer engineer and programmer in 1968 and first used by other programmers in 1970. However, since the Jupiter Ace was not a commercial success, Forth was never a programming language that came to be widely used in many households. Just like spoken languages, computer programming languages evolve through the years as a result of being derived from earlier ones. Visual Basic, for instance, was an integrated development environment from Microsoft for the Windows operating system, known for supporting rapid application development of graphical user interface applications, event-driven programming, and both consumption of development of components via the component object model technology. It was initially released in 1991, having been derived from the earlier BASIC, and a later version of it, Visual Basic 6, which I myself have used personally to create my own material, was released in 1998. Despite being extremely popular, this version was still selected as the most dreaded programming language by respondents of Stack Overflow's annual developer survey in 2016, 2017 and 2018. However, in 2014, some software developers still preferred it over its successor, Visual Basic Plus Net. I have been awarded a few certificates for passing Learn Direct courses related to programming. Some, as you can see, introductory to a programming language known as C++. You can see there, can't you? Introduction to C++ programming, principles of object-oriented programming. In Britain, we say orientated, and in America, you got say orientated. Don't oriented. We don't say that. We say orientated. You can't speak English properly in the States. C++ programming foundation. Right. This particular one was created by Danish computer scientist. I don't know. I can't pronounce his name. As an extension of an earlier language, known simply as C, created in the 1970s by US computer scientist Dennis Ritchie, which remains very widely used and influential today. The C programming language, or KNR as it is alternatively known after its author's initials, is a book designed to help readers to become more familiar with the language, written by its original designer Ritchie and Brian Wilson Kernighan, the Canadian computer scientist. Its authors wrote, "We have tried to retain the brevity of a first edition. C is not a big language and is not well served by a big book. We have improved the exposition of critical features such as pointers that are central to C programming." The other sentence, the next sentence hasn't been copied properly. They go, "We have refined the original examples and have added new examples in several chapters. For instance, the treatment of complicated declarations is augmented by programs that convert declarations into words and vice versa. As before, all examples have been tested directly from the text, which is in machine-readable form." Bill Gates was considered to be the richest man in the world at one point, and it wasn't from having his own YouTube channel. On the contrary, it was the results of something he had come up with way before that was around. He had invented his own computer operating system, known as Microsoft Windows, something still in use today and constantly being updated. Could you design your own operating system, programming language, game, encyclopedia? Maybe you could come up with something and create it from scratch. Not everyone watching this will realise that it's actually a pun on words. Not everyone will be aware, of course, that Scratch is in fact a high-level block-based visual programming language to be found on a website aimed at younger computer enthusiasts, conceived and designed through collaborative National Science Foundation grants awarded to Mitchell Resnick and Yasmin Katai. It takes its name from a technique used by DJs called scratching, where vinyl records are clipped together and manipulated on a turntable to produce various sound effects and music. In the same way, the website allows users to mix together the different media such as graphics, sound, etc. in creative ways by creating and remixing projects such as video games, animations, music and simulations. Over 1 billion total projects have been created from this site, including unshared ones since its introduction in the early 20th century. This book, which I have displayed throughout most of this discussion as an alternative to showing my face as I usually do, which will no doubt have come as a relief to many of the ladies, contains tutorials in Scratch programming, as well as a similar programming language called Python, the origins of which go back significantly further. And the design philosophy of which emphasizes code readability with the use of significant indentation. As stated earlier, computer programming languages, just like spoken languages, are highly derivative of earlier programming languages which preceded them. Most popular imperative languages, including C, Pascal, Ada, C++, Java, and C#, are directly or indirectly descended from a dialect released in 1960 of a family of imperative languages called ALGOL, an acronym for algorithmic language. This became the standard method for algorithm description used by the Association for Computing Machinery in textbooks and academic sources for more than 30 years. Ponder on this. If you switch on a light bulb in your living room, does this bulb actually know that it is being turned on, or have any understanding of the instruction given to it that it should turn on? Of course not. That is completely impossible. A computer is, in effect, made up of millions or billions of tiny switches, all being turned on and off by the instructions being entered into it. It doesn't understand these instructions any more than your light bulb does when you switch it on. It is nothing more than an inanimate object. Many of us will recall a recent sci-fi series on Channel 4 called Humans, set in a parallel universe where the latest must-have gadget is what is called a synth. A humanoid robot, basically a synthetic human, almost indistinguishable from the real thing at first glance. However, once you get to know these things, it does start to become more apparent that they don't genuinely understand what you're saying to them, but are merely programmed to respond to it. That is, until some professor or scientist of some sorts devises a program to give them consciousness, the same as we have. AI stands for artificial intelligence. Will artificial intelligence pave the way for machines with actual consciousness? Where is all this modern technology leading to? This could make an interesting topic for discussion, couldn't it? Please post your opinions on any topics related to computer programming or AI in the comments below. I'll be back next week with another live stream discussion.